everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. It is May 20th, a Monday here. I'm your host, Tommy Brzee, as always, and we're going to start talking a little bit about the House versus NCAA settlement that could be coming this week. It sounds like the non-Power 5 schools are none too happy about the agreement that was settled, and I wouldn't be too happy if I was them either. So we'll break that down to start today, and then we'll get into Florida State a little bit. They are not fighting the ACC right now. They're fighting the NCAA over some recruiting violations, trying to get those punishments dropped because they feel that the NIL basis that they were punished with should not hold against them going forward. Then we have quarterbacks that could flip college football on its head this upcoming year. Some are experienced, established guys. Some are guys that are a little bit lower on the thought process when you talk about big-time players in college football. We'll get to spring overreactions. We've been doing this a lot. We're over to the ACC at this point, so we'll break down Clemson, Miami, Georgia Tech, and Louisville today. And then we'll get to a Good Vibes Monday, and we'll talk about the College Football 25 trailer release. We'll talk about some of the game modes, some of the different gameplay aspects that have come out, and it's all awesome. So we'll break down all of that at the end of the day to kind of get you guys off on the right foot. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen and have a fun back and forth here, you can bring up a question, you can call me out on something you think I was wrong about, whatever you guys want to use that for. You can use the tip and donation link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. You get to have a fun kind of interactive experience here, and we both get to kind of know each other a little bit better, which is always fun. But let's jump in and let's talk about the House versus NCAA case. This is something we've talked about a lot, and plainly, it's because it's one of the most impactful things in college sports right now, and I promise I would not be spending time on a court case if that was not what was going on, because this is not necessarily my favorite thing to talk about. I love talking about football, I love talking about the upcoming season, but this is just too important to overlook. So it sounds like a settlement is coming close to being reached in the House versus NCAA case. If you remember, this is the NIL back pay case that will likely cost the NCAA $2.7 billion in different kind of pots, and that's kind of what we'll get into today. So this settlement could come at some point this week. Pete Thamel did some fantastic reporting over on ESPN about this, and I have some quotes actually from his article in this segment to kind of break down where we're at right now. So the NCAA sent out a 4-page memo to all of the Division I conferences saying how they were going to cut up distribution for this new $2.7 billion. Now, it looks like 1.6 is going to come from reductions in what the NCAA pays out every year. So if you're not aware, the NCAA every single year pays out a certain amount of money to every team that they oversee. And that varies obviously from team to team, but that is where a lot of this money is going to come from, 1.6 billion of the 2.7. That other 1.1 is going to come from what they call NCAA reserves, so catastrophic insurance, new revenue, budget cuts, things of that nature. So there's going to be some things that are going to happen in the NCAA offices that are not going to be easy. Definitely some probably staff cuts, definitely some interesting decisions that they were not planning on making. I think probably 3 years ago, if you asked them, they did not plan on having to deal with this, but this is the reality that they live in. So of the 1.6, because that's the one that we're really worried about when we talk about these new schools, is 60% of that is going to come from schools outside of the Power 5 schools, and then 40% will come from the Power 5 programs. To me, this is a little bit insane, and I fully understand, the counter to this argument, which we'll actually get into towards the end of this, but the group of 5 schools, if you were to stack up the money that they make comparative to the Power 5 schools, and leave out even the group of 5 schools, you have FCS schools, you have CC22s, which are every conference that does not include college football. All of these schools are working with essentially razor-thin margins as it is. And the idea that they would have to, as a group, obviously, garner more of that, pay more of that bill for the NCAA is just insane to me. I don't really understand why that would be the case. Now, I fully understand that the Group of Five has way more teams than the Power Five does, but I'd be very interested to see how that money stacks up comparatively. I would be a little bit surprised if any more than 40. I would be very. Excuse me, I'd be very surprised if only 40% of the money made from college football and college athletics came from the power conferences. I would bet it would be the majority of the money brought in from college athletics. So I think it's a little bit weird. The entire game of college sports and college football in particular has been stacking the deck against smaller teams. That's just kind of the way of the world, and it's slowly become more and more apparent. This is just kind of as apparent as it possibly gets. It's instead of the NCAA trying to throw these smaller schools a little bit of a life raft, they're pushing them further under the water by doing this, and it's a very interesting thing. To me, it should be a rolling scale. I don't know what that looks like. Obviously, this is well above my pay grade, but at the end of the day, there should be some type of percentage that goes top to bottom from Power 5 to the very small schools that make it all fit, and not only make it all fit for, the big guys, but make it all fit for the very small schools. And we'll get into the ones that are going to be the biggest affected, which is the CC22s, which are all of the schools that don't have FBS football, which is obviously a huge revenue builder, which means their margins are much, much thinner. And another group to kind of keep in mind here is it sounds like none of the money is going to be taken away from Division II or Division III schools, which is more than fantastic. But it was said in ESPN, a source and cautioned ESPN, as they put it, that those numbers are fluid and could change. And to me, what that means is if the FCS and the CCA 22s push back on this as aggressively as they probably should, that's where that money's going. That's where they'll make up that bill, is the D2 and D3 schools. I think the NCAA has very little interest in going back up to the Power 5 and asking for more money at this point, especially with the settlement vote coming up this week. So it's going to be fascinating to watch this unfold. I mean, we've talked about a couple of different, impacts of this, but the CCA 22 leagues are something that we haven't touched on, obviously, because they don't have FBS college football. They don't have, quite as much power in, obviously, the discussions that we have, but also just college football in general. And it gives you an idea of just kind of where we're at here. And I want to kind of pull two quotes in particular out here because I thought they were really fascinating in giving you an idea of not only, the power struggle that exists in college football and college sports overall, but just the idea that, an entire group of people can be totally left out of a conversation. So let's start with a source from one of these CCA 22 leagues, and he said, "We're not even named in the lawsuit. We don't have a voice in any of this. We were just told what our taxation is." That's insane. It's not to say that, you should absolutely cater everything you do to the very small schools, to the ones without FBS football programs. I understand that football is where the money comes from. I totally get that that's the game that you're playing right now. But to not even think about them, to not even mention them in the case, to not even bring them up is insane. And it's not, you have to totally cater to what they want and totally bend a knee and, and help them out to the nth degree. But you got to give them a fair shot. And if you're not even talking about them in that room, there's no chance that they get a fair shot. So that's a remarkable thing that I am insanely flabbergasted by, to be totally honest with you. When we look at the NCAA, it's not necessarily quite so surprising that they would be, dismissive to the smaller programs, but to not even talk about them, or maybe they did talk about them and they just don't care, which is terrible all the same. But another quote I wanted to get to here is another one from one of these CCA 22 leagues, and it says, "This is incredibly unfair and a dramatic impact. I'm losing 10% of my operating budget. Do I cut 2 staff members in order to make that money go to Zion Williamson? 90% of this money in this suit projects to go to power football and men's basketball players. A 40% for power conferences isn't proportionate." So this is kind of the bigger thing to me. When we touched on these settlements early on, it was all about paying back some of the former athletes for what they would have made in NIL. as we all understand, the majority of those athletes that would have made big time money are the Zion Williamsons of the world, are the guys that came into this world without NIL, were incredibly popular, incredibly marketable people, but just didn't quite, get the chance to capitalize off that. And Zion Williamson might be the best example, at least in the last couple of years of this. And it makes sense, right? If all of this money is going to the big guys, if all of this money is going to the guys that, played at Duke and played Duke basketball and played Clemson football and played Ohio State football and Vanderbilt baseball, whatever it is, if all of that money is going to those big time programs and going to those big time players, why aren't those programs, footing a little bit more of this bill? Now, I fully understand the counter to that, obviously, is there's 300 non-Power 5 schools. They're paying 60%. There's 68 Power 5 or Power 4 major football leagues in 2024. They're paying 40%. So there is that argument. There's no two ways about that. It is, a little bit less of a hit in terms of, you're spreading out the wealth a little bit more. But I'd be a little bit surprised if the money that was brought in by those two entities matched up to 60 and 40% of what the NCAA brings in. I would argue that the Power 5 brings in 50 or more percent of whatever the NCAA brings in on any year. I would bet it'd be honestly closer to 70 if I'm being totally honest. So this is one of those things that it's going to be hard to fight, to be totally honest with you. They have a meeting later this week with the NCAA and the Power Commissioners, and they're going to pass it. I have very little doubt on that. I don't know if, something miraculous can happen between then to make this a little bit more equitable for everyone, but I think they're going to pass it, and I think it's going to make the revenue sharing that is coming down the road really, really hard to deal with for some of these small teams. It's going to make the big boys very, very happy, and that's a big reason why they're signing it, why they're so eager to get to those meetings and make sure that thing is signed, because they know it's beneficial to them. But all of this is, the way of the world, right? It's just par for the course when we talk about college football right now. It's take care of the big boys and let everyone else kind of fend for themselves, which is not the way that, we wanted this to go, but it feels like that's the reality that we're working with. So you got to make the best out of something, right? So it's going to be really weird to kind of see this unfold. Hopefully the Group of 5 and CC22 conferences can hear their voice, get their voice heard, and kind of at least get somewhat of a fair deal. But I'd be a little bit surprised if that were to happen. But we'll keep you updated. Hopefully we get some news that I'm sure neither of us are expecting. But at the end of the day, it's college sports right now, that's for sure. But we'll take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Florida State, but we're not going to talk about them battling with the ACC. We're going to talk about them battling with the NCAA. They have a couple of recruiting violations that they're trying to get out of because the NCAA exposed a big old hole earlier this year. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about the NCAA versus House case and how some of the smaller conferences are getting buried as they usually do. My hair is all over the place right here. Fix that real quick. But Florida State has been fighting the ACC for quite some time now, but now they're fighting the NCAA, and they are doing it under the guise of some former recruiting violations that they incurred with Alex Atkins having some impermissible contact with a recruit, and a lot of this stems back to the NCAA and NIL, and it's something that kind of got them in trouble with these suits in the first place, and it's something that earlier this year we were talking about with Tennessee and a lot of recruiting violations that happened over there, and how they were able to fully overcome that. I'm sorry, my hair is really annoying me right now, but the NCAA imposed a sanction on Florida State in January when Alex Atkins apparently facilitated impermissible recruiting contact between a booster and a transfer portal player in 2022-2023. So this is obviously something that is not allowed. It's something that I'd be wrong in telling you does not happen everywhere else, but FSU got caught for it. So Alex Atkins was hit with a 2-year show clause, essentially just saying he has to, every single contact he has in the recruiting world has to be logged, has to be, sent off to the NCAA offices to make sure nothing is, going wrong there. And then he will be suspended for the first 3 games of 2024, which is massive. And it's something that we will get into as the season gets closer and closer, because him not there in Ireland against a Georgia Tech team that can score the football, it could get a little interesting. I'll just put it that way, but we'll get back to this for the time being here. They received a 2-year probation, $5,000 fine plus 1% of the football budget, some other things, 5% reduction in football scholarships, things of that nature. So FSU is fighting back on this, and they're doing it kind of using the same model of what Tennessee did a couple of months ago, I think earlier in January or February, when this actually went down. And the story was that Tennessee had some recruiting violations in NIL, mainly around Nico Iamaleava, their starting quarterback this upcoming year, and they were able to fight that and win against the NCAA, arguing that all of the NCAA NIL rules that were in place violated antitrust laws. And that's something that we've heard a lot on this program, and it's something that definitely will play a huge part in the future of college football. But the way Florida State went this is pretty much the exact same way that that Tennessee went about it, because it's a winning formula, right? That's the kind of the way you're going to go about this, and it shows a big old hole in the NCAA, which we'll get to here in a second. But they started fighting this thing, Tennessee that is, back in January, were able to win that one. It kind of started the precedent where NIL was kind of free reign. There was not a lot of rules around it. There was not a lot of ability to enforce anything, and I think you've seen some of the consequences of that in real time this offseason. But this goes back before that happened. So this is obviously something that had been doled out a little bit earlier on. But at the end of the day, it does change. I think we've shown with all of these court cases and things of that nature, when something changes, when a rule changes and they admit that something was wrong with it, people are starting to come. It's the same principle with the NIL rules. When those changed and everything kind of shifted away to players making money and all of that type of thing, you started to hear from the Reggie Bushes of the world. You started to hear from the Johnny Manziels of the world, from all of these people that could have made all that money and didn't get the chance to. So it shows you just how big of a door all of this stuff opens, because it doesn't just fix problems, it doesn't just create problems, for the NCAA going down the road when they lose an NIL case going forward. They can get repercussions from 2 decades ago because of something they lost, on Tuesday or whatever. So it's something that is going to be really, really tough to deal with for them. And to be totally honest with you, I don't see a way that they win. And maybe this argument is a little bit different. Maybe there's some more finagling that the NCAA can do. But from where I'm standing, there's not much of a leg to stand on over there at the NCAA offices, especially around NIL. There are a couple of things that, the NCAA still has ability to kind of wave their big stick around in, but NIL is not one of them. I can promise you that. People have totally lost a ton of respect, a ton of ability to actually care about what the NCAA says when it comes to NIL because of that Tennessee suit. And Florida State's probably going to win this one. And it's the best argument that I can possibly make for college football having a new governing body. It's something that I've pushed on here for since I've gotten the show, frankly, and it's something that I will continue to push for pretty much until it happens, or until the NCAA becomes something that it hasn't been for 2 decades. So I tend to lean that it's going to be a new governing body, and it's something that kind of needs to happen. And it's not that the NCAA isn't trying to fix this system. It's not that the NCAA isn't trying to find answers to the NIL system that, currently works, but the reality is it's a broken system, and revenue sharing is a start to the answer, a players association is a start to the answer, collective bargaining the same, but it's not the end all be all, and it doesn't save you from lawsuits popping up in the future, even though it seems to think that they keep telling everyone that it's going to save them from lawsuits in the future. I don't know if it will, unless you have an absolutely ironclad agreement, which is something that doesn't really come at the NFL level, much less at the college football level with a players association that is brand new. So I think this is a very sticky situation for them, and I think it's something that just illustrates almost perfectly that what the NCAA is, especially to college football programs right now. All they are essentially is just a group up top that they have to be nice to at meetings, and that's about it. They know that the NCAA does not have a lot of juice over them. They know that the people that actually have the power are outside of the NCAA offices, and even if they are inside the NCAA offices, they have lost a lot of that power recently, and everyone's taking advantage of that opportunity. So Florida State's doing the exact same as what anyone else would do in this situation. I don't necessarily blame them for trying to pull this off, because why wouldn't you? If the NCAA opens up a door for you where the system is all types of messed up, and you don't have enforceable rules, you'd be a little bit dumb to not try to take advantage of that and get yourself out of this sticky situation and have Alex Atkins on the sideline for those 3 games, because that's huge. So this just kind of goes back to something I've said a number of times on this show, which is you got to have other people in the room. We've gone so long where it's the NCAA, it's TV execs, it's some lawyers here and there, and that's about it. That can't be the only people in the room. There are so many incredible people across the sport that actually care about the students, actually care about the athletes, actually care about the sport being better than it is right now. Ramogi Huma is a fantastic person that we actually will absolutely talk about as this goes on, because he might be the leader of the Players Association once that is, realized and actualized. But a remarkable person there. He is a great example. Former players that have played in the NIL era are now here. Now they're not the big time names that made, millions of dollars or anything, because those guys are off in the NFL or NBA or whatever. But there's plenty of guys that experience this. There's plenty of guys that understand what this does and the consequences of it. And former coaches are here. Nick Saban just retired. Jay Wright retired a couple of years ago from the basketball side of things. All of these people are super important to the future of the sport. And for whatever reason, they've been kept out of this room. And now I fully understand that there's going to be power in the hands of TV execs. There's going to be power in the hands of lawyers at times. That's totally unavoidable, especially with the way that we're currently working in college football. But we have to be able to dilute that somewhat. We have to be able to get some of the people in the door that know what this is about, not only from a perspective of they understand the sport, which is a totally other thing that I'd love for the people in that room to actually understand, but also just understand what these kids are under. No one in the NCAA offices can ever really wrap their head around what it's like to go through a recruitment with NIL and with transfer portal and with all of this different stuff at stake at 18 years old. None of them have that experience. So we have to get people in the door that actually do. We have to get more people in the door that actually are pushing for the right things, and we have to get a new governing body. Florida State is definitely going to win this, and plainly just because no one's scared of the NCAA anymore. no one is worried about what the NCAA can do because the NCAA has slowly lost power over the last little bit, especially over college football, where all of the money is being made, and it's becoming a very, very interesting situation. So obviously the settlement is going to help. It's going to help kind of subside some of these worries for the NCAA, but they're far from over. There's a million questions out there, and the NCAA, from my tally, has an answer to a grand total of 0 of them. So you're going to have someone new come in the door. I don't know if that integrates them into the NCAA. I don't know if it's a totally new entity overall, but something's got to happen. Because the people currently that are running this sport and running college sports as a whole are not the right people, very plainly. And it's no disrespect to these people. I understand that their job is a lot harder than, it's a lot easier said than done. But at the end of the day, you have to get new people in the room that these teams can look at and actually respect and actually kind of fear to a certain extent, and follow certain rules and get rules in place that make sense and are enforceable. And there's a ton of things that need to happen, but I've been waiting for them to happen under the NCAA for just a little bit too long. So I think it's time for someone else to step up to the plate and hopefully figure all this stuff out, because right now it's a outright nightmare. But we're going to take our second break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about football. Finally, we're going to talk about quarterbacks that can kind of flip college football on their head. Some of these guys are under talked about guys. Some you might have forgotten after some great seasons in the past. And one is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, but has as much power over the season as anyone. So want to break that down right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about Florida State trying to fight the NCAA on some recruiting violations that I tend to believe they'll be able to get out of. If they can't, then Alex Atkins will miss the first 3 games of 2024. So it could be a huge, huge thing to watch over the next couple of weeks. But let's get into some quarterbacks, and let's talk about some quarterbacks that could flip college football on its head. Some guys that maybe it's a conference that is wide open. Maybe it's, if they can put it together the way they have in the past, they can put together a, championship season for this team. And then one guy that just has as much power over the season as anyone in the country, in my mind. So let's start with Kyron Drones. He is one of my favorite players going into the season, one of the guys I am most excited to see, and he's on a team that I am very excited to see. Virginia Tech is one of those. It was something that Josh Pate was talking about on his show, and it's something that I kind of grew up during the Virginia Tech domination of the ACC. Not domination, but we're right in the mix for the ACC year after year. We're right in the national mix year after year. Just came up a little bit short. And I guess some people have kind of forgotten that was a thing, or just didn't really realize that was a thing because you're on a little bit of a younger side. Well, thank you for watching for the first of all. But the reality is Virginia Tech can be a lot more than they are right now. And this feels like the year where a lot of that stuff can be put into action, and Kyron Drones is the reason for that. He is one of the few returning quarterbacks in this conference and is one of the most dynamic and fun playmakers in the entire country. And on top of all of this, Virginia Tech has a very workable schedule. There's a reality where Virginia Tech gets to that Miami game undefeated 4-0. They likely should do that, honestly. If they beat Miami, they could be rolling into a Clemson game at home 9-0 in Week 10. And that's something I don't know if everyone is fully prepared for, because it would be game day in Blacksburg. It would be a night game because they would absolutely demand it be a night game. And that place would be on fire. It would be one of the best, maybe the best atmosphere in the entire country next year if that were to come to fruition. And Kyron Jones can absolutely be the guy that brings him there. And if he gets him there, that game could be a defining college performance for him. So he's a guy that I'm watching very, very closely. Might be one of those that you look up in, week 9 or week 10, and you say Virginia Tech is firmly in the playoff conversation. And if they beat Clemson, then they've kicked the door down. That's for sure. And then you get to Cam Ward in the ACC. This one's obvious to me. Mario and Miami have absolutely pushed their chips to the center of the table. They are ready to go. They want to win the conference. They want to compete in the playoff, and they want to do something that hasn't been done in Miami for quite some time. So Cam Ward is one of the most important players in the entire country. There are tons of things in place at that Miami team. The offensive line is going to be really good. The wide receiver group is one of the best in the country. You have a little bit of holes on the defensive side of the ball, but you added some really good guys like Simeon Barrow Jr., Jalen Alderman came over from Louisville, so you did some very nice things and definitely helped yourselves out there. I think this is a year for Miami that isn't just about 2024. It's about 25 and 26 and just Miami football overall. This could be one of the most defining years for them in quite some time. This could be a year where not only, you ignite 2024 in the next couple of years, but the next decade of Miami football, because you'll find once they get up and once they're really a part of that big-time conversation, they're hard to get back down again, that's for sure. But then let's go over to the Big 12, and let's talk about KJ Jefferson. This is one guy that I feel like a lot of people have kind of forgotten about. Did not have the best year by any means at Arkansas a year ago, but transferred over to UCF and has done really well in his spring ball, and they added some guys that will really help him out in the spring portal cycle. You have Penny Boone coming over. You have Javarius Johnson from Auburn. Ajay Hall's doing a walk-on at a wide receiver position, a very talented kid that I don't know how big of a role he will play for them, but definitely someone that has a high ceiling that, if you can put it together, could be a great player for them. He's definitely not someone that, you're super enthused by after what you saw last year, but Gus Malzahn excels with big guys that can run, that's for sure. I think you're remembering who I'm referring to in that, but at the end of the day, he is not Cam Newton. I'm not trying to say that, but it does lend itself to his ability to kind of realize his potential, and I think there's a ton of open spots in the Big 12. Obviously, I think Utah is the big boy, and they're the team to beat, and I have very little question about that. KSU is the second team there, and I feel fairly good about that. After that, it's pretty wide open, and if KSU stumbles, things get a lot more wide open. So UCF is one of those teams that, they're pretty far down the list. They're definitely have to make some things happen, thread a little bit of a needle, but Gus Malzahn's one of those guys that can do that. So it'll be fascinating to watch that. Garrett Green is a fascinating guy too. I think comfortably one of the more under-talked about guys in the country, and partly because of the other quarterbacks in this conference. They're just insane across the board. But Garrett Green took so many steps last year into running this offense more efficiently and just at a quicker clip, and just made it look like it was incredible, really. And I think if you can continue that, things get very, very interesting for the Mountaineers. It's not just him out there. It's not like they have the quarterback but nothing else. They have tons of guys to help him around, and I talked about it last week. I think West Virginia could be this year's Oklahoma State in the Big 12, and Garrett Green would be a massive reason for that if that were to come to fruition. Let's move over to the Big 10, though, and let's talk about Drew Aller, because this is the biggest and most clear answer, in my opinion. This guy, if he hits a ceiling, could be one of the best quarterbacks in the country, could win the Big Ten, could do incredible things for Penn State this year. If he, does what he does last year, they could be the exact same team, and Penn State fans could be very, very mad around this time next year. But the reality is there are still questions about his game. But the kid's physical ability is insane. His arm ability is remarkable. He obviously did not have the year that he wanted a year ago, and will definitely want to be able to put that in the rearview mirror and keep moving. But the reality is, when you have all of the tools that this kid has, it makes it a little bit easier to turn that corner. That's just the reality. He's one of the more confusing players in the country heading into this year in my eyes, but I do think he has a real chance to hit that ceiling. It's obviously a huge question mark after a year ago, but I don't know. I'm betting on Drew Aller. I really do. I'm buying into the hype again, and I might get burned again, but I do think this kid has a gear that we have not seen and is going to be just remarkable to watch him hit. And then we have Dylan Raiola. This one's a little bit obvious as well. The Nebraska defense is going to be good. No doubt in my mind, they're going to be one of the best in the entire country. Dylan Raiola is really where Nebraska's season, his hands are where Nebraska's season lies. Got lost in my words there. But if he can live up to the hype, he can be incredible. Like, it's insane what this kid has come into this program, being expected to do. But the reality is he has the ability to do it. He's built like an NFL quarterback. The arm talent is stupid. And if he can realize that potential, things get really interesting, and not only for Nebraska to get to 9 wins, but for Nebraska to possibly even compete for a Big Ten championship, because when Raiola, if he can put that stuff into action, right from the get-go, if he can, jump off the page and just light the world on fire, win that Colorado game by a ton, and do incredible things, people are going to start looking that direction very, very quickly. And he doesn't necessarily have to start too quickly because that defense is going to be so good, but I just think if he's that kid promised, if he's the kid that he was promised to be right away, there's a reality where Nebraska finds themselves in Indy at the end of the year, which would be absolutely wild after the last decade that they've had. But let's get to Brock Vandagriff and the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky has tons of things in place this year. That being said, they had tons of things in place last year. The only variable that has really changed, at least aggressively, has been the quarterback. They lost Devin Leary a year ago. Definitely not the performance that they were hoping for a year ago from Devin Leary, but still put together some good moments. Started 5-0 and then just kind of tailed the rest of the season. The difference is Brock Vandagriff, in my assessment of players, has one of the best pure arms in the entire country. The kid can do stuff with a football that not many people can do. That's just the reality. He has remarkable arm strength. He can fit balls into really, really tight windows, throw on the run, different arm angles, different platforms, all of the stuff that you want. He can do it. And if he can hit that ceiling that he has, this is an SEC dark horse, not only to get to the title game, but to possibly win it. Deone Walker is one of the best players in the country at defensive tackle. You have Berrien Brown, you have Jamori Macklin at wide receiver, you have Dane Key at wide receiver. There's so many good things about this team. An offensive line that's going to be really solid, that if Brock Vandagriff can put it together, Kentucky's no longer just, a team that is going to win their 8 or 9 games and kind of move on to the next season. They could win 10, 11 games and make some teams very, very nervous, including a Texas game that could be very important towards the end of the year. And then the big-time one, Jalen Milroe. This one is absolutely obvious, and he's easily the best player on this list right now. I feel very confident in that. But everyone keeps telling me that they're going to take a huge step back and that everything is going to go wrong for Alabama and they're going to go 9-3 and things are going to tear apart at the seams. And while I don't necessarily think they're going to go undefeated or do anything incredible, there's a variable in this that I don't think people are giving as much love to as they should. If Jalen Milroe takes a step forward, this team is capable of literally anything. If he makes a couple more throws that are NFL level throws, if he gets better at the 10 to 20 yards down the field throws, if he can put some of those on the target and make this wide receiver group that, isn't necessarily at the level that normal Bama wide receiver groups are, if he can make it easy on them, this is a national title contender. Make no two questions about it. Obviously, there are some concerns with the defense, particularly the back end, but I think they're going to be okay. They have tons of guys. They portaled really well at that position that I think they're going to be able to find 5 guys. And if Jalen Milroe can hit another level this upcoming season, people are going to be really upset. I'll put it that way. People are going to be very, very upset because they're going to realize that Bama's not just, Nick Saban. Now, he built a lot of what is going on right there, but it didn't necessarily all leave with him. So it's going to be fascinating to watch that one unfold. I think Jalen Milroe, in my estimation, might be the most important player in the entire country this upcoming year. So it'll be fascinating to watch that unfold. I don't know, there's plenty of other quarterbacks I could have put on this list, limited myself to 2 per conference, but there are some fascinating players, that's for sure. But we're going to take our third break here. When we come back, we're going to do some spring overreactions. We're going to go to the ACC for the first time. We'll do Clemson, Miami, Georgia Tech, and Louisville, and then we'll get into some other teams as the week goes on. But stick with us, and we will be right back with some spring overreactions.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some quarterbacks that could turn college football on its head. Some big time guys, some guys that you maybe aren't talking about too much, but also one of the best players in the entire country in Jalen Milroe that I tend to believe is the most important player in the country, but that might be a segment for another day. But let's break down some spring overreactions here. Let's go over to the ACC for the first time. We've done the Big 12, we've done the Big 10, we've done the SEC. Now it is time for the ACC, and let's start with Clemson because they are one of the most interesting teams in the country, and I think the slow fall is going to continue. I kind of hurt saying those words, to be totally honest with you, because I like when Clemson is in the mix. I don't necessarily love when they're dominating the ACC the way they did prior to the last couple of years, but I like when they're around. But the way that I'm looking at this team right now, they are still the team to beat. I have very little doubt in that. When I'm going into this season right now, they are the team to beat. They have tons of really good players on that team. They have, Cade Klubnik going into his second year as a starter. There are tons of things that are very, very, positive about this team. There's no two ways about that. But when you look at this offseason for Clemson, it felt kind of like they were a car that was just revving its engine. They were in neutral. They weren't moving anywhere, but they were revving their engine. They were, way in front of the pack. They had, outpaced the ACC for a decade and had been doing incredible things in recruiting and had, made up this entire, chasm that existed in the ACC for quite some time. And then they've just been revving their engine for a couple of years, and it's done okay for them at times. 10 wins, 9 wins. It's not necessarily the sky is falling by any means, but everyone else is catching up, and everyone else is using the big time thing that could help you get to that finish line, which is the transfer portal. And Clemson has made it abundantly clear that they have no interest in using it. Dabo Swinney has been as clear as he can possibly be, I suppose. But the way I look at it, it was Clemson possibly taking 1 step forward while Miami took 4, and while Florida State took 2, and Louisville took 2 as well, and everyone else in the ACC took steps forward. Clemson might have. We just have no earthly idea because the roster is the exact same as it was a year ago, but you're replacing some big-time players on defense. So I'm very confused about this Clemson team. I still think they're the team to beat. I still think they have every ability to right the wrongs and get back on the right track, but everyone's catching up. And this might just be the year where not only one team passes them, but multiple teams, and they find themselves 8-4, and they're 4th or 5th in the conference, and every Clemson fan is scratching their head wondering what happened over the last couple of years. But it's going to be interesting to see that unfold. But let's move over to Miami and talk about Cam Ward. I've talked about him pretty much ad nauseum at this point, but this one feels like a very good overreaction because this kid looked great in the spring, and he looks like he is super confident in his position. Now, this Offensive Player of the Year for the ACC will have plenty of candidates. You'll have quarterbacks, you'll have running backs with some great players like Jaden Ott over at Cal, who's someone we'll get to probably later in the series, maybe later in the week. You have some very, very talented players at wide receiver in that conference, so it's going to be a battle, but Ward to me has the clearest path out of anyone. When you talk about Cade Klubnik, there is a big step that needs to be taken. There's no two ways about that. When you look at DJ Uiagalelei, still very worried about his consistency and accuracy throwing the ball when you come to really making a big-time impact this upcoming year. Cam Ward, to me, has a lot of the tools that some of those other guys don't have. And on top of that has probably the best offensive line of the group, which helps a ton. So if he takes Miami to the ACC title, he'll win this award. I have no doubt in my mind in that, because when Miami's back on top, they're going to want to highlight Miami. And I fully believe that he'll deserve the award, but even if it's really close and maybe there's a splitting hairs going on, I think they'll go in the way of Miami on that one. But there's so many dudes outside for Miami, and Cam Ward's arm talent is something that I think is a little bit underappreciated. When we talk about him, we always talk about when he can extend plays with his legs and do all these incredible things, but if an offensive line can actually block for him and keep him upright, I think he can pick apart a defense. And then when, things get a little bit hairy, he can make stuff happen with his legs. But I don't think that's the end-all, be-all for this kid by any means. But I do really love this kid. I think he's one of the most important players in the country. He could totally flip the world on its head, as we just talked about in the last segment. And his ceiling is quite a bit higher than some people even assume, when they already assume it's pretty gosh darn high. But let's talk about Georgia Tech, and let's get into why I think Georgia Tech is going to ruin someone's ACC title hopes. This is a team that has a luxury that not many people have. We talked about it with Virginia Tech. They have a quarterback that's returning with a year in the system under his belt. It's not something that is in plentiful supply by any means around the ACC, and it cannot be overestimated how big of a deal that is. This kid executed this offense to a remarkable degree. They were in, I think, the best offense in the entire conference from a scoring perspective a year ago, and return a lot of really good guys. Eric Singleton is back. They got Rutherford back. A ton of really talented guys at wide receiver. I think they're going to be able to do some things that some people just assume they can't do because they're Georgia Tech. And I kind of understand that sentiment, but this team is a little bit different. They have Florida State to start the year. They have Louisville, NC State, Virginia Tech, Miami, all on their schedule. One of those, or maybe two of those, they will win. I feel very confident in that. I think this is a team that is not to be messed with and is not to be taken lightly, because they can score with you. There's no two ways about that. So I would be a little bit wary of the Yellow Jackets if I was an ACC team, especially one that wants to get to a title game, because this is the team that could slip you up and make you just short of that trip to Charlotte. But let's finish it off here with Louisville, and let's talk about how I think the Cardinals are going to take a step back in 2024. This feels a little bit obvious. Obviously made the ACC title game a year ago with a remarkable coaching performance from Jeff Brom, a really, really good transfer portal class. But I think it's going to be a little bit rough in year two. And it's not necessarily because they've done anything wrong. The portal class has been great, but it has been a little bit more even. They've lost a little bit more players than they did a year ago, and they brought in some players that I'm a little bit more skeptical of, including their starting quarterback, Tyler Shuck from Texas Tech. It's not that I don't think Tyler Shuck has tons of ability. It's just when I look at what Jack Plummer did a year ago, he was able to execute Jeff Brom's offense to an elite level, at least 90% of the time. There were certain moments that were less than desirable for sure, but definitely did a really good job. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was with Jeff Brom at Purdue before they both came over to Louisville. Tyler Shuck does not have that luxury, and I think it's going to take him some time. I think they have some really good players at wide receiver. I think their O-line is going to be okay, but I just don't see them repeating what they did in 2023. I don't see the quarterback play being at the point where it needs to be for them to do that. The defense also, I don't think will be as constant as it was a year ago. They've lost some big-time guys. Jermaine Lole, we've talked about a number of times. Jalen Alderman, another guy we just talked about. So there's not that safety net if things don't start rolling right away. So I'm a little bit worried about Louisville. I don't think they'll take a massive step back and miss a bowl game by any means, but I do think there is a little bit of a worry of this team not being what Cardinal fans had hoped for after what was a remarkable 2023. But we're going to take our final break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about College Football 25. The reveal was on Friday. We got so many details I want to break down. The trailer was just incredible, and I want to break down everything that you guys need to know, and we'll continue to do this as more stuff comes out. But for the time being, we'll take our fourth break, and we'll be right back talking all about College Football 25. Welcome back, everyone. We just talked about some of the overreactions I had from the spring with the ACC. We got into Clemson, Miami, Georgia Tech, and Louisville, and we'll get into some more as the week goes on. But let's get to a Good Vibes Monday, and let's talk about the College Football 25 full reveal reaction. There was a ton of stuff that came out from this last Friday. We barely missed it. It all came out around 11 a.m. We went off air right around 10, so definitely not the ideal timing for all of that, but still tons to break down. And the trailer is obviously where we want to start. We had a ton of really, really cool things in this. We had some of the biggest players in the game prominently featured in this game. We had Quinn Ewers, Travis Hunter, obviously the two cover athletes that are definitely going to be a big part of the marketing of this game, right front and center in this one. And every time I see more and more from this game, it seems more and more like they're not cutting corners, like they're not using, everything that they've had in their bag in the past to influence this upcoming game. It feels like they're putting everything they possibly can into making this game unique or different in some way. And obviously, there's still quite a ways to go to figure out if that's actually the case, but definitely feels really good. You saw some of the great things. You saw pre-game traditions. You saw all the fans going crazy. Some of the great things that make college football special. But first of all, I just want to start with the graphics are just remarkable. There have been a number of incredible pictures that have come out. Obviously, it's a little bit easier to do when you're dealing with a video or you're dealing with a picture than real live gameplay, but it seems like it's going to be very, very visually appealing, along with being an awesome product on the field. But the trailer had tons of Michigan and Alabama and Texas and all of the big guys, as you can assume, but also had some Wyoming, had some smaller schools in there that we definitely love to see. Absolutely will be the teams that most people, I find, are going to be using their dynasty mode. But one team that got a little bit disrespected, I guess you could say, is Ohio State for whatever reason. They were definitely very upset on Twitter over the weekend, and when I first saw it, I thought it was a little bit ridiculous. It was a video of Donovan Edwards just stiff-arming one of those guys into the earth, which is definitely not ideal by any means, but I thought it was a little bit overreaction. And then I saw another clip from the trailer, which was Illinois holding up the Illabuck Trophy, which, if you're not familiar, is the trophy that is given out between Illinois and Ohio State every year. Illinois hasn't won that trophy in 17 years. So I don't know what's going on over at EA. I don't know if Connor Stallions is in the building somewhere and making decisions about this game, but Ohio State kind of got a little bit disrespected. I won't lie. I'm not necessarily a big-time Ohio State guy, but even I can say that was a little bit aggressive towards the Buckeyes in that one. But let's break down some other things that came out because of this. And one of the biggest things is the game modes. It's something that, we remember so fondly over 11 years ago now. That's just insane to think about. But Dynasty mode is obviously one we all remember. You create a coach, you pick one of the 134 FBS teams, get a coaching staff, and keep moving from there. You get recruiting from high school prospects to transfer portal all at the same time, which would be very, very cool. There's also a different thing where you can create a new school and do a team builder, which is something I'm definitely going to do. If you have any ideas for team names or school names in the comments here, that'd be great. I know Josh Pate over there has Pate State. Would love to get something going over here. And then you have online dynasty mode, which will give you 32 players. So essentially, you can get 32 of your best friends. All of you pick a different team, and you can play each other throughout the year. And that's something that I absolutely will be doing. If I can scrounge up 32 people to do it with me, I absolutely will be taking advantage of that, because would love to have some bragging rights over my friends. There's no two ways about that. But then let's talk about Road to Glory. This, to me, was my favorite in the original iteration. I absolutely loved creating players and going through high school and then college and hopefully winning a Heisman at the end of it all and a national title. So it's definitely something that I will be playing almost immediately. You create a player, you go through their college career, manage their weekly schedule, GPA, playing time, more, all of that, and you can enter the portal in this cycle. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that works. Maybe some people will utilize that the way that some other people have recently and flip-flop all over the place. Maybe some people will stay true, who knows. But at the end of the day, that'll be a very interesting thing. We also have Road to College Football Playoff, which is something that has not been in place in the past, but it seems to be just one normal season. You pick a team, and you try to make it to the College Football Playoff. I think this is obviously new to the this version because of the playoff becoming a thing, but it seems to be pretty straightforward. It's like any other, single season play mode that we've had in the past, I think. And then Ultimate Team, one that has made people very mad, which I did not know made people so mad, but it's creating a team with your favorite or best players in college football. Much like the Madden way of things, you can do in-game purchases to get more tokens, to get better players, to upgrade your players, whatever that looks like. So definitely a very, very interesting and something that I've never really dabbled in with Madden or any of the other FIFA or any of the other Ultimate Team options out there, but definitely a really interesting thing, and I'll probably mess around with it, but probably won't get too interested. I'm going to spend a lot of my time on that Dynasty mode and that Road to Glory mode, getting UNLV back to the top, but and then let's get into some gameplay that has gotten released over the last couple of days that is very, very interesting. And the biggest one to me is the wear and tear factor. Player ratings will kind of change as the hits start to add up. So you'll lose some of the ability, some of the speed, you'll lose what, players lose throughout the game, which is something that will be very interesting. You have to manage your roster's health, limit fatigue, do substitutions, things of that nature to just make sure that your team gets through a game, gets through a season. It'll definitely make those dynasty leagues very, very interesting, that's for sure. And then you have pre-snap recognition. This is something that has been in place in Madden for a good bit, but you'll be able to audible, read the game, make the right decisions, see kind of, maybe a safety's rolling down into the box and you see that it's going to be cover 3 and you have the ability to get a crosser underneath or whatever it looks like. It'll definitely be really, really interesting to see how that goes, and will probably be what separates the men from the boys in this game, to be totally honest with you. And then you have home field advantage, which is going to be very, very interesting. Something that I think they've tried to do in the past with these games, but it just never quite hit the same way that it should. And they're going to try to make it work in this one. Depending on the quality of the crowd, the game, players could encounter distractions like the screen shaking, which is one I'm sure we're all familiar with. Missing play icons, so not knowing who is who in terms of who you're passing to, and then the play art could be moving as well. So maybe you have a post route over the middle of the field that looks like it's on the other on the absolute outside of the field. Maybe it's a ton of different things that could happen with that. So would be a very cool thing if they can execute that the right way and definitely add an advantage to the home field. I think it'd be a really cool thing and would add to kind of the difficulty of this game, which obviously, you want to be a little bit straightforward, but you also want some authenticity from it, which would be, it's going to be really, really cool to watch that unfold. We did get confirmation that is going to be full ESPN broadcasters across the board. Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit will be there for the big games, but then we'll have Reese Davis, Jesse Palmer, David Pollock for some other games. I think there's rumors of some other smaller ESPN people being involved, but I haven't heard anything that is substantiated on that yet. But we're less than 2 months away from this game coming out officially. Just got to hold on a little bit longer. Just got to wade water for just a little bit longer while we wait for this thing. More details will start to come out. We'll do some more segments of who I think might be 99, who I'm most excited to play with. Actually, that might be our Top 10 Tuesday tomorrow, if I'm being totally honest. So we'll do tons of content around this thing until it comes out. And then once it does, maybe you'll see me doing a little Dynasty mode and cutting up some highlights for you guys on Monday mornings. Who knows? But it's going to be awesome. This is a game that I have waited for quite some time. I grew up during the heyday of this game, and it went away right when I was really, really getting fully into it, and just cannot wait to have it back. I cannot emphasize that enough. I spent hours and hours and hours playing this game, and I will go right back to that way of things right when this comes out. My 14-year-old self cannot wait for this moment, so very, very excited. I'm sure all of you are as well, but we'll break down all the updates as they come, and we'll get you guys as excited as I am for this upcoming game. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have people covering every sport you could think of. We have basketball, football, baseball. We also have women's sports. We have wrestling. We have golf and hockey. It's just everything you could possibly need in the world of sports, we have it covered over here at GSMC. So please come on over and visit us whenever you need anything. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool.